What's happening? Welcome back to another episode of Riot Starter TV. We got a whole lot going on, a whole lot in the chamber. As you know, we've had all types of different serious broadcasts this week. It's still the 55th year anniversary of the Black Panther Party. It's also, a lot going on with this whole police state. It's a lot going on with internationally. So today I wanted to bring in my main man who's broadcasting from Parts Unknown. My man, a veteran Panther, former political prisoner, you know what I'm saying, and a straight up and down political analyst when it comes to our movement. I'm talking about none other than my brother, comrade Dhoruba Bin Wahad. What's happening, Dhoruba? How you doing, brother?
Peace, black man. How is it?
Man, in your words, I'm fighting fire with a feather. You know what I'm saying? How about that?
Yeah, man, that's a struggle, Black.
Man, I threw you off with that one, huh? You were.
Nah, I know how difficult that is, bro. I know.
Man, look here, man. They say it's hard out here for a pimp, but it's much rougher on a hoe, though. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah, but but we too black to crack, man. So we just gotta understand what time it is and how we got to adjust. I mean, we survived the bullwhip days and we survived up into now. So we really need to try to at least understand what we up against right now and how we should be moving if we want to, survive, past the 24,000 species that are being extinguished every year or something like that.
Man, I feel like we one of them if not yet. You know what I'm saying? We on a fast pace towards that.
Yes.
Yeah, man. I'm glad you can stop through and holler at a young rebel like myself.
Man, come on, man. You're an OG now. Just because you've been dyeing your dreadlocks don't mean you ain't an OG, man.
Come on, man. Knock it off, man. I ain't getting there yet. Anyway, man.
You know when you go into a room and everybody say Baba, you start looking around and see who they talking to, and you realize you're the only one in the room.
Yeah, I had one of the younger comrades on our morning show talking about some I'm sitting here with my elders. I was like, who you talking to? Watch your mouth.
Man, you gotta accept the role, brother.
Hey, man.
You gotta trust the climb, man.
Hey, man. What Chairman Fred says is terrible, but it's fine. I want to. I mean, I know it's the 55th year anniversary of the Black Panther Party, and I know you've been on the mic speaking on different forums. We had a commemoration here the other day with Charlotte Hill O'Neal, Bilal Sunni Ali, a good brother Kazi Toure, he was talking about, and Kim Holder and Sister Sukari. So I wanted to bring you in too, man, to weigh in, man. What's your thoughts on it being 55 years later on the party, and where do we go from here, and how do we get here?
Well, that's a lot. Oh, excuse me.
Sound good. I hear you. Look like you froze up. You dropped your device, but
yeah, man. I got, for some reason or other, I can't turn the Kalonji. The 55th anniversary of the Black Panther Party. A lot has happened since the founding of the Black Panther Party in the mid-'60s, late '60s, and I think it's very important for young folks today in this generation and the generation, their parents, to understand that history doesn't repeat itself. So when we're talking to OGs or elders like myself, we understand fully that things have changed and evolved, not necessarily for the better, and things have gotten progressively worse in a lot of places, in a lot of situations, because we have more Black elected officials than we've ever had, and less power and less control, and so things have changed, but history, doesn't repeat itself, and this is very important for folks to understand. But it can rhyme, and we are in a historical moment that is similar, but quite different to the historical moment that the Black Panther Party found itself in when it was launched in 1966. And at that time, the police state hadn't been fully militarized as it is now. Um, the war on drugs were launched in order to recapture and reconfigure a generation that abandoned the values of the so-called earlier generations that fought World War II. Their youngsters, the baby boomers, they were rebelling against the war in Vietnam, which the ruling elite and the corporate and the military industrial complex tried to force off as fighting for democracy in Southeast Asia. But they committed almost 1 million troops, like 700,000 or something of that nature, troops to Vietnam. And it was a bloody conflict, and young people fled to Canada, and they fled the draft, and they shut down the campuses, and the peace movement grew, and solidarity with other oppressed liberation movements around the world was on the uptake. And so when the Black Panther Party came along, this was the time. The Rumsfelds and these crackers, they were in college then. They were the conservative students in colleges that were going on strike and shutting down the academic buildings. Black students were occupying occupation of different campuses, demanding Black studies. And so this was a very volatile and a very dynamic time, and the response of the state at that time was to first try to organize the repression. We know about COINTELPRO, we know about Price Act, we know about the different programs that the military, Operation Shamrock, that they instituted because the draft was in effect, and over 57% of the combat units sent to Vietnam were Black. Yeah. And so there was a serious there were upheavals in the cities. In Detroit went up in flames, Newark went up in flames, Watts. All of these things were happening, and they had no national police force. They had no way to really deal with that. So they began to evolve the military. They began to militarize the police, and in fact, one of the first operations with the acronym SWAT on it was initiated against the Los Angeles Police Department, the Los Angeles Black Panther Party, in 1969. Okay. A few months before Fred Hampton was killed, and the Panther 21 were arrested. So we need to understand that at that particular moment, there was a militant left. White youth had turned on and turned out, tuned out, and so the establishment, the status quo, felt that they had to do something, and the FBI began to launch its various counter programs to destroy the so-called Black Power movement and Black radicalism, and so the Black Panther Party, when it emerged the way it did after its first year, in existence, it began to have a strategic or take a strategic analysis and a strategic vision of of the situation we were in. And in 1969, under extreme repression, under continued police surveillance and arrest of our activists, we called for a united front against fascism.
And, before you go there, right? Because I know a lot of folks want to know, but we definitely want to talk about the United Front against fascism. When and what got you involved in movement and struggle? Because of the fact that a lot of folks, just automatically think that, there was just, a light just popped on and everybody said, okay, boom, we're gonna form this party and we all gonna join. When and where, what got you into it? Got you involved?
Well, I really want folks to read that in my book, but because it's you asking the questions, and so how me and you do. So I was in prison. I got out of prison in 1967, and when I got out of prison in 1967, the Vietnam War was going on. The new left was rising up and holding demonstrations against the war and all of these things. Right. But me, I moved up to the South Bronx where I grew up, and I went back to, most of the things that I used to do before I went in, off the streets and stuff like that. But in 1967, I had to change my venue for reasons that you could read about in my book. But I had to, exit stage left from the South Bronx, and I call myself making a dynamic move and move to South Jamaica instead. So it was in South Jamaica that I met my future wife at the time, Iris Moore, and we moved to the South. To the Lower East Side, and you could basically say I was, I was a blippy, a black hippie or something. I guess you could say I was trying to paint and do my art thing, and I was selling weed and stuff, because I lived right across the street from one of the baddest underground jazz emporiums in New York, Slugs. And Jackie McLean, them used to come through there and jam 3-4 o'clock in the morning. So Richie Havens was down the street. So I used to sell them weed, So, but that's what I was doing. And then I went to a social gathering with some young radicals, and they were mostly white. And they were in what section of that is New York? There's another section in New York. Anyway, I went to this party, and they were going straight away from the party to Washington, D.C. to demonstrate against the war. And the demonstration was called The Rise on the Pentagon. I think it was in October of '67. And I had gotten out of prison in May of '67. And April of '67, something like that. And so I went with them. We jumped in the, make peace not war, Volkswagen buses and everything, and went on down to DC. And when we got down to DC, man, it was literally hundreds of thousands of young folks, converging on the Pentagon. And Dick Gregory was one of the keynote speakers. Then he was fat. Dick Gregory was a little round mound, and he vowed that when he spoke that he was going to go on strike until the Vietnam War, till the troops came home from Vietnam. And so that's how he wound up being a vegetarian and that skinny. It took a long time from 1967 before the U.S. got out of Vietnam. He didn't know he was getting into. I think the U.S. didn't get out of here in 73?
Yeah, he was hungry than a mug, right?
He was a vegetarian by then, man. Did you know Did you read Dick Gregory's vegetarian diet and stuff? Yeah, man. Yeah. But it's true though.
That's what got started.
So when I went to this demonstration, that's how I got started, man. I went to this demonstration, and there was a lot of young black students from HBCU schools that were there, but their issues were not just the war. Their issues were the government's um, use of military force and all of that stuff. So I rode back to New York with some black students, and we got into a big thing about the so-called Black Power movement at the time. And you know, so like I said, I grew up in jail in the sense that I was in jail for 5 years, from like 61 to 67, or something like that, 62 to 67, and so I had a whole different perspective on the police and how we should be, how black folks need to organize themselves. I was on some stuff, so so we debated back and forth, and then one of the sisters said, well, you sound like one of them Panthers out of Oakland, so I said, I had read about them small a little bit, but I didn't really get into them. I said, well, if they was talking about putting their foot off in the ass of Popo or the police, then I understand that program, Right. So I got back in New York, and I came across that article that Eldridge had written about Huey and Bobby when they were called upon to be the security for Betty Shabazz when she came out to the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. And Eldridge wrote this really bad piece on the Panthers, and I said, man, if there was an organization that reflected what I felt and what I went through, it would be this group. But of course, they weren't national then. Right. You see, and so I think it was Ron Pennywell came to New York after Eldridge came here and spoke at spoke downtown, and Eldridge came here with DC and some other Panthers. He was on the Peace and Freedom ticket as a vice president candidate, and so when they came to organize the party here, it started at LIU University with some former SNCC members. Mostly former SNCC members were the first members of the new chapter of the New York chapter of the Black Panther Party. We didn't have branches in Harlem or nothing. Everybody was meeting at Long Island University for political education classes, maybe twice a week or once a week on Saturdays. And so when the party was first organized, then I went down to the temporary office that we had in Brooklyn on Fulton Street, I believe. I went down to sign up in the summer, I believe summer of '68 or something like that. And when I got down there, by the grace of Allah, the police vamped on two Panthers who were on the bullhorn outside the office talking in the streets. And it was a hot August day, and there was a scuffle, and they took them to the police station. And an instant crowd grew up, and that's when I first met Abuba Dika, Sonny Carson. And Sonny Carson was from Core. He was originally from Brooklyn. He used to be a Corsair Lord in Brooklyn, in fact. That was a street set out of South Brooklyn there, what they called what's the name section down there near the Naval Yard. I'm getting senile. So there was an instant demonstration, from the Panther office there where I was signing up. A whole lot of folks, about 200, 250 people, marched on the police station where they were taking these two brothers. And then they had the first black inspector, a black a staff grade NYPD officer. I forgot his name. So whenever there was any rumblings in the black community in New York that might get out of hand, homeboy, they would trot him out, and he would come in to the local precinct, make his presence known, and try to chill everything out. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So he came to the precinct, and the folks on the street, mainly Sonny Carson, demanded that the people see the brothers to see that they weren't brutalized, right? So a delegation went into the police station, and for somehow or other, I wound up being in the delegation with Sonny, going into the police station to check the brothers out, and then they were going to be arraigned that night at the courthouse downtown in Brooklyn, and we mobilized, or I went downtown to Brooklyn. We followed the van and everything and got down there for the arraignment. There was about 200 or 300 crazy black folks from Bed-Stuy, down at the courthouse, took the police by surprise. And so they tried to come out and cordon everything off. And the brothers were brought out into court, and everybody started cheering and banging on the tables and everything, banging on the chairs. And so it almost turned into, bedlam in there. The judge bugged out, ran into the cloakroom, remanded him on bail. And a scuffle broke out outside with the police. And that's when they snatched Chairman Brother's briefcase. And all this stuff happened. But what it really was the kicker was that I was outside the police station, and the news, the news stations were there because the Black Panther Party had just started. And it was a Black Panther Party office, so the party was in the news. So the New York newspapers, the 6 o'clock news, hadn't come out yet, or the 11 o'clock news, whatever. And so they were out there trying to find out, talk to people. And so some of them rolled up on me. 2 rolled up on me, and with a mic and all of this stuff. And they said, so what happened? So I ran down how the police, had vamped on these brothers earlier today, organizing in the black community, yada, yada, yada. So when I got back to my little spot in the village, put on the 11 o'clock news, there was I was on the news, and they had under the ticker there, Black Panther Party spokesman.
And this is the first day you're going to sign up?
That was the first day I went to sign up, bro.
You didn't even get your letters yet. You just
man, they didn't even have
nothing.
Bro, they didn't even have a Harlem branch then. So the ink on the application form wasn't even dry yet.
You ready now?
So I was ready if I didn't get the gold, bro. And back then if you look for me in the world, when I'd have been gone. So things was moving fast back then, bro. No lie.
Right.
I'm trying to tell you now, man. And so what happened is I kept going to the PE classes, and then when they started breaking up, so we were gonna break up into chapters, and it was broken up by where people were living, right? Like if you were living in Manhattan, we was talking about the Harlem branch. If you was living in Queens, it was the Queens branch, stuff like that, right? Because everybody came from all over the city to the political education classes at Long Island University at that time. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
And the party didn't have any real programs, and didn't have the type of structure that it would have several weeks later. But at that time, Judon Ford was authorized to be the defense captain for New York, deputy defense captain in New York. Ron Pennywell, who organized the party, mainly got a lot of folks who came to the party from SNCC. That's when Rap Brown, Jamil Alameen, and Kwame Ture had broke away from SNCC. And the New York chapter of SNCC, was quite the New York chapter of SNCC. Right. With Mae Jackson, Mama Mae, and she don't take no shit. She don't take no shit now. And she's 80-something years.
Right. Imagine then.
Yeah, imagine then. Right. So you know, a lot of the original members of the party, early members of the party, were from SNCC. Fred Richardson, who had a bookstore, an African bookstore in Bedford-Stuyvesant. His bookstore became the party venue in Brooklyn, one of them. And so I was from Manhattan, and so the whole thing in Lumumba, Shakur, and everybody, they was all from Harlem. So we set up the Harlem office, and that's a story in and of itself. But like I said, all this stuff is in my book, man, and good folks got to do that. I want to talk about the lessons to be learned from the Black Panther Party that this generation have never been in touch with, and are intent now on reinventing failure based on the successes that we had.
No doubt. Let's rap about that. No doubt. Yeah. I appreciate you taking us back through memory lane, because I've heard some of this while we was on the road and everything, but you know, I know that oftentimes, you know, folks don't, you know, they don't know what to ask, for lack of better words. You know what I'm saying? You told me the story about Dick Gregory and all that before, but you know, it's good to especially on this grand occasion. But yeah, go ahead, brother. Let's get back to business.
Well, you know, I think the one place to start is that when a generation, one of the major strategies of repressive regimes and governments and people in power, whenever they are faced with resistance from the oppressed people, from the underclass, from people that they exploit and dominate, they have certain tactics, and one of the tactics that they have is to encapsulate the most militant, the most potentially militant segment of those people, and move them away from their understanding of their own history, their own radical tradition, and then coupled with that is the brute physical removal of leaders that can transmit that type of history and vision. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So besides killing the Malcolm X's and running black folks into exile, you know, that talked about black people defending themselves, and aside from killing black civil rights leaders and black activists, the objective of the power structure was also to co-opt this militancy and encapsulate it and direct it into avenues of reform and avenues of protest that they could manage. That's why if you listen to Malcolm's speech about the original idea of the March on Washington, the March on Washington was supposed to be more like black folks' version of January 6th than it was, you know, marching down and singing "We Shall Overcome" and getting around the pond and listening to speeches. You see, which is not to say that event lacks in historical significance at that particular time. It was a historically significant event, but it was an event that was encapsulated and because of so-called potential to shut down the seat of government. That would have been the objective of the most militant workers and activists at that time, was to march on Washington and make them recognize our power, make them recognize that we were people who deserved to have our own self-determination, that if we weren't going to get the type of treatment and the type of services that we deserved, and the jobs that we deserved, and the rights that we deserved, then we were going to shut down the government. Okay. You see? So that had to be sidetracked. That was encapsulated. So you had the Urban League and the NAACP. You had the integrationists in the South who have been fighting and dying for basic rights and everything. You had them put at the head of I mean, Malcolm talks about it better than me. So we should go listen to Malcolm's speech. I think it was the Ballad of the Bullet. Wasn't that speech?
Right. Yeah,
man. So go revisit the battle. Yeah, revisit the Battle of the Bullet. Spare me, man. So what that strategy is taken in every revolutionary struggle around the world. not only do you have to kill the Amilcar Cabrals or the Edward Mondlanes, not only do you have to kill the Patrice Lumumbas, but you have to reconfigure their whole idea of nationhood. You have to reconfigure their whole idea of who they were as a people to make it conform to the neo-colonial construct. You see what I'm saying? And they did that with us. You have to kill the leaders of a revolutionary movement in order so that they don't pass on their information and their knowledge and their experience to another generation. This is why where we see where revolutionary nationalist movements were successful, the people that were revolutionaries, whether they were the Viet Minh in Vietnam, whether they were Frelimo, whether they were PAIGC in Guinea-Bissau, they didn't get the message that they were supposed to lose. They didn't get that memo.
Right on.
And because they didn't get that memo, they passed on from one generation to the next. And look at how the Vietnamese structured their struggle against the most powerful military entity on the planet. After they done ran the French out, they came back after World War II, trying to reestablish their hegemony over Southeast Asia and Vietnam. They fought the French to it. They fought the French and beat them and kicked them out in 54. And the Americans began to trickle in 58, 59, and 60 until they finally just occupied the country, talking about they were establishing democracy and fighting communism because these countries will fall like dominoes. Right. Okay, so you had this. So the Vietnamese didn't get that message that, yo, man, they were supposed to lose.
Okay.
You see, so they trained each generation. They fought for 3 generations until they were free.
That's right.
You see, but with us, we survived the bullwhip days because the white supremacist construct in America had made our survival dependent on each other. We didn't survive, men survived by themselves without women. We didn't survive that way. We survived together. You see, even though they were ripping our families apart, literally from the womb, you see, we still are here. You see, and that meant that we evolved a certain attitude, a certain means, a certain mechanisms, a certain culture to survive white supremacy and to fight back and to make our voices be heard. This is why, of all of the people in the United States, the U.S. government feared black people the most. And it's reflected in J. Edgar Hoover's memo. They feared us more than the Communist Party. They feared us more than any other insurgencies or any other national minority was black people. Why? Because of the way we had to endure and survive. We had to survive the bullwhip days. We had to survive sharecropping, feudalistic sharecropping for decades. We had to survive Jim Crow. We had to survive the pushback against the civil rights movement, mass incarceration, and the war on crime and crack and heroin. We survived all that shit, bro.
That's right. Without a doubt.
You see, and each time, each one of those things that I said represented a particular approach to the consciousness of black folks, when by the time that Martin Luther King and the civil rights integrationist movement began to come to the fore. And the civil rights movement began to embarrass America because of the Vietnam War and white America's pretension that they were in Vietnam in order to keep democracy and freedom alive for the Vietnamese, when at home they were putting dogs on black people just to vote. You see? And so this was a historical moment in which the right had to change their strategy, had to change their tactic. So what did they come up with? LBJ came up with the war on poverty. Said, well, these niggas is burning down the ghetto. Maybe if they had a little investment in the ghetto, they wouldn't burn it down. You see, so we start giving out grants, and that's where the black leadership, the Boule Negroes that we got today, the misleadership class, that's where they come from. You see, they come from there in academia. And what did they do with academia? Black folks was shutting down colleges and occupying buildings, saying they wanted a history, they wanted an education that was relevant to who they were. They wanted an education that taught their true worth and their humanity, and it really taught them about themselves as African people. That was one of the points in the Black Panther Party program, wasn't it?
No doubt.
And absolutely. And so how did they assuage that? Well, they gave us Black Studies programs, and then they made sure that you had to have certain types of qualifications to run the Black Studies programs. And then the Black Studies programs gave way to different other studies programs, gender studies, other ethnic studies, Chinese studies, and all of these things. So they then said that because we have all of these other study programs, this money that we used to allocate for y'all, has to now be divvied up amongst these other programs. So they encapsulate these crackers in the deep, man. So they encapsulated that now. You see? And so what came out of that was an educational, academic class, a class of academia that grew up at the same time that the dashiki wearing cultural nationalists like Mama Lama Ron Karanga and them, were easy. They were easy pickings for confining and defining our struggle solely based on race and not class and race. You see, and so we got all hung up in the cultural nationalism. We got into that with the afro and the natural hair and the dashikis and the sister walking 2 feet behind the black prince. And we started talking about how once we were kings and queens and 5,000 years ago, as if nobody emptied out the toilets and nobody's descended from them motherfuckers that was cleaning up the toilets of the kings and queens. Me, I'm a descendant of the slaves that built the workers that built the pyramids. They weren't slaves, they were workers. Or the workers that built the pyramids. I might be that descendant. I might be a working class hero. Why I gotta be a king or a prince?
That's right. Yeah. The bullshit, the nostalgia.
Yeah, and that is morphed into the Hotep generation that we have today. You see, and so a lot of the things that we see today, whether it's whether it's the narrow nationalism of folks who believe that white supremacy is only a caste system, and it has and that capitalism isn't the major structure through which white supremacy has organized itself and its economy and its political systems. So therefore, we have to understand as Africans that real liberation comes with us evolving and having self-determination and the ability to determine our own destiny, to build our own structures, to employ ourselves. And that's not possible without a revolutionary change in the paradigm of economics and political power in America. So the Black Panther Party understood that although we were about Black liberation and not integration, although we were abolitionists and not integrationists, that we could not achieve what we wanted to achieve in our total liberation unless there was a revolutionary a movement in white America, in the dominant culture at that time. This is why the Rainbow Coalition was like it wasn't calculus. It was a very simple fundamental understanding that we had to organize ourselves as oppressed people and identify with other oppressed national minorities who were suffering the same fate as us, and build a third force in America, a political party that represented the people, that represented all the people. That's why we talked about Black power, Black and power to the people, power to Black people, power to Latin people. This is why they could not co-opt that. They could not co-opt that like they co-opt the hashtag movements when Black Lives Matter. Then they say, well, Blue Lives Matter, Red Lives Matter, all lives matter. So what you talking about? That's encapsulation. That's because the folks that formulated those hashtag movements were not in touch with the radical history of what we were really supposed to be dealing with. The struggles that we're going through right now, whether it's with voting rights or with gerrymandering and gentrification, we've already won those battles in the 60s and 70s. We won those. That's how you got rent control in New York, because of the tenant movement, the massive tenants movement in New York. The reason why you have history programs in public schools and celebration of black and various cultural ethnic groups in these urban schools is because we fought for that. We fought for community control of the schools, decentralization of education. This was a big battle in New York against the Federation of Teachers, the teacher union. And this was a lesson that we've learned about unions. We've learned about the power of unions, but we also learned how the capitalist ruling class co-opts these unions, use these unions in order to or try to misdirect the power of these unions into areas that they could control. And so,
go ahead. I'm sorry. No. I was going to ask you about these unions, but go ahead. Keep running.
Well. So what I'm saying to you, in New York, there was a big struggle with the United Federation of Teachers. They went on strike because there was an experimental educational district in Brooklyn called Ocean Hill-Brownsville. And in the Ocean Hill-Brownsville school district, the school board, which was black, fired these white Jewish teachers who were miseducating young black students, and they began to put their own teachers in. Well, the Federation of Teachers said that was violations of their contract with the Board of Education, and they went on strike. And it was during that strike that the Black Panther Party had just started in Harlem. So we joined with the parents, we joined with the community, and we began to break into the schools. We opened up the schools, and we had most of the janitors and maintenance people were black in these schools. And then this was in the winter too. So they would come in and start the furnaces and the heat up and all of this stuff. So the United Federation of Teachers got the police and injunctive orders so that we couldn't open these schools and create liberation schools. We brought down black students from Columbia University to the schools to have tutoring classes of the students in the daytime. So this is what I'm talking about, how when a whole community resists the imposition of oppressive laws and statutes and try to take over control of our children's minds, our schools, our public safety, that if the community rises up and organizes itself and unifies itself with a strategic vision and a tactical plan, then we could take control of these institutions. And so what happened in New York, in order to resolve this, in order to ameliorate the UFT, the United Federation of Teachers, the Board of Education in New York changed this whole organizational profile and gave more say-so to the communities in which the schools were in. The schools were reclassified. Teachers, the United Federations of Teachers, which was something like 87% white, was heavily integrated. A lot of black educators came into the school systems in New York and began to change the complexion of the schools. But what did they do to counter that? It was what they taught and what they didn't teach. You see? So the board, and they wouldn't have been able to do that unless unless the state and the government were the ones that certified the teachers. You see? And the teachers were getting educated where? They were getting educated in schools that were in turmoil at that time. They were coming out of academic schools that had new Black studies programs and all of this stuff. So what I'm trying to say is that I'm not critical of individuals and people who are struggling, trying to empower particular segments of the Black community, of the oppressed community, and they're focusing on that work. Unity doesn't mean uniformity.
Right.
Okay? So there's a lot of young people, there's a lot of activists, old and young, today, whose sincerity and whose love for Black people and whose hatred for the treatments of homeless people, of single parent households, of women, and everything. They're waging concrete struggles, but we need to understand, and this is very important to understand, that there's never been a revolutionary movement in which intersectional oppression trumped the oppression, the national liberation of the entire people.
That's serious, right there.
And this is how encapsulation works. When you come up with a hashtag movement and you realize that when you look at the legislation that comes down, the concerns that come down, more laws have been passed in Congress under that bald head bootlicker's that just died. I forgot his name. What's that bootlicker's name?
Down in Atlanta.
Yeah, that guy.
It's some of John.
Yeah, Lewis. Yeah. Oh, bubblehead. Oh, Mr. Potato Head Negro. You know that dude.
You're a cold dude, man.
So they have to raise a whole generation of politicians. I mean, that would give all of these intersectional movements, you know, who've been marginalized, who've been set upon by the system, who've been exploited and brutalized, and in many cases murdered. You see, they come up with legislation for these minority communities to the detriment of the larger issues of the people, of Black people, of the masses of people. You see what I'm saying? And if you notice, liberation movements that waged armed struggle in Africa and in Asia, they never allowed differences of gender or intersectional oppression, whether it was tribal or ethnic, to supersede the liberation of the entire people and their ascendancy to national power. Okay? And in fact, it was in the crucible of that struggle that these different groups and these different segments, you know, got to understand how to work together and how to build the type of government and the type of society and the type of economic system that was fair to everybody. You see? So when we came up with these hashtag movements, hands up, don't shoot, Black Lives Matter. You know what I mean? Come on, man. In the white supremacist culture, we know that Black lives ain't never mattered. It was mind over matter. White folks didn't mind and we didn't matter. Sure. I mean, what about that we don't understand? But if you came up with if that BLM stood for Black Liberation Movement, watch how things would have been different.
All the way across the board.
Yeah, you wouldn't have got no fun. All of a sudden, you would have got. Well, you won't get a lot of funding for what Pan-African solidarity with liberation movements. You won't get funding to support the struggle in Palestine. You're going to get funding from Amazon. You understand, to decentralize the police and build community control of public safety. You're going to get. You wouldn't have got a dime.
Hey, no signs in the yard. Nothing. No T-shirts. No buttons.
Absolutely, nothing. You see, so encapsulation is a strategy that governments and status quo power uses, to dampen real militant struggle, real meaningful mass struggle. So when we seen folks taken to the streets after George Floyd was brutally murdered, they took to the streets after Trayvon Martin, after George Floyd, after Michael Brown. The people were in the streets, but they weren't organized. Sure. And what did the enemy do? The enemy used that disorganization. They used the victims to lead the movement. Sure. And so we had movements led by victimhood. Okay. And so you would have the family of brothers who were brutally slain, whether it was Breonna Taylor, that were brutally slain, telling you let the courts take their course. Right. And in every time, except in the George Floyd case, in every time the police got away, the police got qualified immunity. And where does qualified immunity come from? What does it mean? And what it really means, if you really break it down and you really look at it, it's a status given to special agents, armed agents of the state, These are armed agents of the state. They are not working class people. Health workers don't have qualified immunity when they kill somebody. They could get sued. Right. Nobody has qualified immunity. If you're drinking on the job or you got an ounce of alcohol in your a small reading of blood in your alcohol, and you operating a subway train and the subway train crashes, or for non-mechanical reasons, you understand? You think your ass is gonna say, "Well, I got qualified immunity"?
Ain't nothing happening.
Ain't nothing happening. There's no civil servant. There are no workers that have the right or the power to kill you in pursuit of their job, in pursuit of their purpose.
Defended on it immediately.
Yes.
Right.
So what does that mean? That means that the police oftentimes, and the reality of it is that the police have more control and sway over policing in our community than we do. They influence elected officials more than we do. And if elected official wants to get elected mayor or dog catcher in the city, he has to get the endorsement of the police union. Otherwise, he's soft on crime.
Now I want to, while you on that right there, it's funny you said that because of the fact that we know that the mayor of Atlanta, Kasim Reed, was just endorsed by the police union here. I understand that Eric Adams up in New York, who's also running for mayor, was endorsed by the police there.
He was a cop.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what I'm saying? But these police unions, let's I wanted to talk about that, the police union in relation to you talked about community control of police. And one of the things that the Black Panther Party and many of us, courtesy of folks like you, began to push while everybody was yelling defund the police, we started talking about decentralize the police. I want to touch on that, the importance of abolishing the police unions and the police unions' role in this in this whole situation.
Well, I don't want to use the word abolition in relationship to the police. However, I would use abolition in terms of a movement based, anti-racist movement in the United States, an anti-white supremacist movement in the United States that is not reformed. I do not believe, and I think it can be borne out by history, that the United States, that the Republic of America is anything other than a white supremacist construct. That's how it started. That's how it began, and it has tried to ameliorate that through different reforms and different legal mechanisms. But America still is a racist nation. So any anti-racist movement, any movement that's designed to empower people of color, any political organizations, any community that wants to do that, they have to have an abolitionist mentality and not a reform mentality. They have to abolish white supremacy, at least in terms of how it affects their daily lives. Having said that, okay, when we talk about the police, we have to understand the role of the police and their relationship to the state. We are talking about a state now that has went from a white settler, colonial settler state to the national security state that it is today. Eisenhower warned about this in 58 or whenever when he left the office. He was a military man. And he said that the American people had to beware of the military-industrial complex because these people were going to come into a position where they would begin to control the whole, the electoral system, the political system, and the economic system. And if you look at the biggest corporations, the 5 top corporations that benefit the most from government contracts, they're all corporate corporations that make the military hardware for the United States, for the Pentagon. Okay, they're Lockheed Martin, Teledyne, and all of these corporations. You understand? And they have an enormous impact on U.S. foreign policy. Indeed, they're the ones that write U.S. foreign policy. Okay? The United States spent $2 trillion in Afghanistan for 20 years, and what did they come out with? Nothing. Okay? And the only reason that war went on that long because somebody was getting paid for it. Whenever you see oppressive, whenever you see political chicanery going on and political bill and maneuvering by the Democratic or Republican Party, you have to ask yourself, who is getting paid from this? Who, Key Bono, who is going to benefit from this. And they try to make it look like we benefiting when in fact we know that's not the case. Okay, so when we talk about the police and the police unions, we have to understand first and foremost that the police are not workers. They're armed agents of the state. This is why they don't have collective bargaining. They have collective bargaining, but they can't go on strike. So what do the police unions do? What are they doing now about the vaccine? They say right now that we urged our members not to take the vaccine and quit instead. But when these officers quit, they still have their certification papers as police officers and could go to another police, another state, another police department and become cops. You see, but the union is the ones that's telling the government, that's telling the state that employs them that we ain't taking the vaccine and we're going to urge our members not to do this. Whereas the United States government has told the military that vaccines are mandatory. Okay. And that soldiers can't say, well, we ain't following orders and we ain't going to take it. Every soldier in the U.S. Army going to take that shit. He's going to get kicked out the Army. And they volunteers.
Right.
You
That's
see?
serious.
So what we could see the power of these 4 or 5 police unions to coerce to coerce the state and I'm not saying this because I'm an advocate of vaccination. I'm saying this to show the length and breadth of police union power. You know, and how they can determine policing in our community more than we can. When they was talking about stop and frisk, when they was talking about certain types of police procedures, the unions are the ones that were talking about without these procedures, our officers weren't safe, and these procedures are cool. I mean, the court's afraid of the unions, the politicians are afraid of the unions, and why are they afraid? Because they're the goons who serve and protect. They serve the ruling class and the rich and the property class, and they protect their property. That's what they mean by
certified and sanctioned mob. Right.
That's what they are. And so if they serve this function for the state, how come they have why are the unions allowed to create and write a whole different bill of rights for the police? I mean, there's things that police that when they commit a crime that they are subjected to that the ordinary American citizen is not subjected to. They can't be questioned 72 hours after they kill somebody, you know, so they can get their stories straight. You see, and you know,
that shit alone is crazy.
Yeah, then they go on paid leave, which means they hang around the precinct talking about, yeah, I shot the nigga, but you know, I thought he was going for a gun. I know it was a wallet, but what the fuck, man? You know, I got problems with my wife. When they released all of the status on who got killed, they talk about how he has a criminal record, how he had run-ins with the police, you know, he beat his wife. Right. But when they talk about the cop, they're talking about how he's been on the force for 42 years, and he's the best thing since fried ice cream. He's the coolest dude on the thing, you know, he's a loving father. And this dude is probably a drunk that beats his wife, that they had to put him in some type of detoxification program. We don't know nothing about these people. Right. We only find out after they go to trial and we get discovery, oh, this ain't the first black man he done had to beat damn near to death. He got a habit of doing this.
That's what he do.
Okay. Yeah, so what does he do when he go home? He beat his wife? You see, we don't know. You see what I'm saying? And so what I'm saying is the police unions is the major shield that allows the racist police culture to persist the way it does. So I would say that instead of wasting our energy on useless petitions to the United Nations declaring we charge genocide when we have a black Secretary of State, a vice president, a black representative at the United Nations, and all of that, and we charging genocide. I don't know when the Nazis were committing genocide against the Ashkenazi Jews in Europe. I didn't see that Hitler had a deputy chancellor named Finkelstein. You see,
Right.
and so we need to understand that fascism and white supremacy, the edifice of white supremacy, depends on the armed agents of the state to enforce and maintain order. And this is why the police have been militarized ever since the 60s. So when they brutalize us, when they beat us down, when they murder us, when they come in our communities and break up our demonstrations, this is not police brutality. This is not something that they're not supposed to do. This is their job.
Right.
That's their job. And if you want to change that, you have to change who paid it. You have to change who tells them how to do their job.
That's right.
You see,
we're on for the viewers. If you're just tuning in, this is Riot Starter TV. We're on Black Power Media. Make sure you hit subscribe and check out our channel. We're live with Dhoruba Bin Wahad, a veteran Panther, political analyst, author. I'm damn sure not gonna call you a academic. So,
man, I'm not opposed to academia, man. Don't get this. I'm not anti-academic. I think that. Let me clarify that, man. And it's very important. I think that academicians or black professors have a duty to turn out black people who have a sovereign mindset, who are prepared to go into their community and in whatever area or expertise that they claim, to bring a revolutionary and empowering practice and professionalism to that area. So I'm not anti-intellectual or anti-academic at all. I'm anti the bootlickers and the cowards who hide behind their analysis and rationalize and justify paradigms of white supremacy and racism and exploitation under the guise that they have a lot of letters after their name.
Right on.
You see,
No
and so so I think that I think that we have some of the most brilliant black minds in the world, in the world, and we just have to empower them so that they don't be afraid to teach our children the truth.
That's right, based on career.
They don't, based on getting what they call that, tenure.
Tenure. Right.
You see what I'm saying?
And I'm just messing with you because I heard interview you did with our homeboy Dr. Jared Ball. You know what I'm saying? Shout
That's
out
my man.
No doubt.
That's my man. That's my man.
No doubt. So I had to throw that monkey wrench in there. But what I wanted to ask you about too, man, you mentioned United Front Against Fascism and why that's not at the forefront. And I think that's very important as it pertains to things that are going on internationally in regards to places like Afghanistan, the Congo, Haiti, and other areas. Can you speak on United Front against Fascism and what that means?
Well, at that time in 1969, like I said, history doesn't repeat itself, it just rhymes. At that time in 1969, the U.S. war machine was heavily involved in Vietnam. It had just segued from Korea to Vietnam. The United States has been at war all of its existence except for 22 years. Okay, so the United States is a garrison state. It's a warlike. It's a police state, but it masquerades as a democracy because people supposedly have the right to choose their leaders and to choose who runs the government. When in fact they have no choice. They have a choice between ho and hum. They have a choice between a Democrat or a Republican, both of whom carry forth the idea and the notion of American hegemony abroad, American power, and capitalism. These are the two major political parties. Okay, and they have emerged out of the European colonial state that enslaved us. Okay, and so I don't want to go into the whole the whole history of the post Reconstruction and how that was betrayed and how we got to where we at right now. But suffice it to say that when we talk about the police, we are talking about institution that came out of this history, all the way from the plantation. And that it's a particular culture, it's a reflection of the white supremacist construct of the United States. So when we talk about abolishing police, we are talking about as abolitionists, abolishing policing as it's presently constituted and has it evolved up until this point. Now that's not possible. That's not possible unless the armed agents of the state, at least the ones in our community, have a different relationship to power and to the law, okay, and to the community, okay. So what the Black Panther Party did at that particular point in time, in 1969, the police, if you noticed, every riot, every rebellion that occurred in the 60s, from Watts all the way up, occurred because of either the rumor that the police had murdered somebody, or that the police had brutally murdered someone, much like we see on our cell phones now, damn near every day. Okay, and that's what started most of the rebellions in New York, in Chicago, in Watts, in Detroit, was police murder of an innocent black man or woman. Okay. So when we understand that the police, just like point number 7, when the Black Panther Party came along and defined the police as an occupying army in the black community, it meant that we had evolved from chattel slaves to a domestic colony, and we're colonized in these Bantustans in these cities where the police are there to make sure we don't break out, make sure we don't tear shit up, to make sure we don't cause no problems. You see? And unless we change that relationship to the community, nothing's going to change. And if all politics is local, which they are, then we should be able to change that paradigm on the local level. And how do we do that? Well, when we called the United Front Against Fascism, 7,000 activists showed up, mostly white. This is what they said. But these were white activists who were from SDS, who were beginning to bud and beginning to understand the necessity for radical change, if not revolutionary change, in white America. Okay, so we organized, or we said that out of this meeting, I think it was 3 days, that everybody should go back to their own particular community and organize an NCCF chapter, a National Committee to Combat Fascism. And that they should put on the agenda through local politics and organize in the community there for decentralization of the police and community control of the police. Okay, decentralization of the police was basically the strategy of disconnecting the political structure of an urban area, which at that time was predominantly white, to the police, because most mayors and most city controllers, they're the ones that appoint the police chief. You see, and they appoint the police chief basically, and they have to get the approval of the person that they're going to appoint by the union. You see, and so the police then become the goons of the local mayor. You feel what I'm saying? They become the mayor. You see what happened in New York when they had a black mayor. You saw how the police treated him. They treated him like he was a washroom attendant, and that's what they call him. You see the same thing. Stinking Dinkins. That's what they call him. You see, and then you had in Philadelphia, when they burned down the MOVE headquarters, when they burned down the MOVE and burned up the black community, they had a black mayor.
Listen good.
Who was scared to death of the police. He said so in his memoir. You see, So decentralization of the police meant that the public safety boards would elect or come up with a, a candidate to be the city police public supervisor, the main, or what they would call the police chief. Okay, and so therefore that position was subject to democratic centralism in a way. If we had public safety boards that determine policing in each of our communities, and that might be broke down by voting districts and stuff like that. But we had a public safety or community control board, so they determined what type of policing would go on in this area. Let's say the west end of Atlanta might need a different type of policing to deal with some certain things that's happening there that's not happening over in the Philadelphia section. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So you have community control board. You have community
control.
Community control. Yeah, community public safety boards. Yeah, community control. Now, the training for the police, the professionalism of the police, of course, has to go to a certified academy and all of that stuff, right? So you had to have someone that controlled all of the policing in the urban area, because everybody didn't live everywhere in the city. There were industrial areas where there was no housing. There were other types of, different types of areas where there had to be policed also. Okay, so you had a supervisor of police that was appointed or selected by the different heads of the community control boards of that particular city.
Now, in order for that to exist, you'd have to dismantle the police unions, correct? Because of the fact that you're talking about.
Well, what history has showed us is that when we made those proposals, it was the police union that put up millions of dollars to thwart that from happening, from being put on the referendums, and to thwart it from being put to the vote of the people in the municipalities where we were the majority. In fact, they hijacked the idea and turned it into civilian complaint review boards, where the members were appointed by the 2 members were appointed by the mayor, another member was appointed by the police union, and the community appointed 2 members. So he was always outvoted, and they had no subpoena power.
You know, what's crazy about that, I can recall in Atlanta, you and I was actually on a panel with the head of the I don't know if you remember that, the what do you call it? You're just talking about the community the boards that's appointed.
Oh, the civilian complaint review board.
Right.
Yeah. I remember that.
And he straight up told us that, they take the complaints, but they really couldn't do anything. So it's like, what was your purpose?
Yeah, they couldn't. Your purpose. Yeah. Your purpose was to, when people came with complaints to them, your purpose was to make like there was a process for them to get justice, but they wouldn't get anything, because you could not hold the police accountable.
Right.
Okay.
Complaint about it. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So now, if you decentralize the police and broke command, that political link between the elected mayor, you understand, and law enforcement, and law enforcement then became the type of job that the professional cop had to appeal to those communities and to those community boards to say, this is the type of job I can do as an administrator, as an executive over all of the police in the city. And then the decentralization of the police was designed to do that. But at the same time, just saying you want community control of the police don't mean that you actually have power to hire and fire cops. You see, so how do you deal with that? Well, then you look at all of these white communities, all of these white counties. You in Georgia, there's over 150 counties in Georgia. Some of these counties in Georgia have less than 2,500 people. Okay, less than 5,000 people. But they have community control of their police because the sheriff comes from amongst them. He lives in the community. They probably knew him since he was a kid. His uncle is probably the court clerk or the judge. So they have an indigenous intrinsic relationship to law enforcement in their community. Right. And that intrinsic relationship means that law enforcement in that community is responsive to their needs and to their sensitivities. Right. You see? Right. So they have this by nature of the fact that they have community that they votes got, that they control this county, right? Whereas in the black community, we have no such power, none whatsoever. The police don't live in our community, so then how do we rectify that? Well, we rectify that by making standards of employment such that police, when they do their probationary period, I believe the average cop probationary period in New York is like 2 years or something like that, or 18 months or something like that. While he's on probation, he has to live in the community that he's assigned to. That's right. Which means that housing has to be put aside for him and his family. His kids are going to have to go to the same school your kids go to. You see what I'm saying? So now he has an interest in what happens on that street when his kids step out on that sidewalk.
Residency clause. Right.
You see what I'm saying? So residency clause, the unions would oppose that adamantly. Because they in New York, they all living in Staten Island somewhere. They all living in suburbia and they're commuting into the job. You understand? They got all the perks and all that stuff. And you can't fire their ass after their probation period is over because of the union. Yeah. You see? Yeah. So the struggle for community control was so crucial to the unions that they put money into turning the referendum around in New York and other places and making sure that the only thing that got on the referendum or that the people voted on was Civilian Complaint Review Board. And that's what you have in most cities now. A toothless, meaningless Civilian Complaint Review Board. And on top of that, to add insult to injury, most of the police departments that have the most racist and reactionary policing have black mayors and black police chiefs.
Right. Right.
If we look at most of the victims of police murder in the last year with George Floyd, the police chief and the police, they were black.
Right. Like you talked about Atlanta, slaves running the plantation.
Exactly, which means that to be black is not sufficient.
Right.
You see? And because we're responding to the white supremacist construct of political power and culture in America, and we respond as a people based on our African heritage, our ethnicity, that is also informed by class.
Right on. I was going to say we got about 10 minutes, but I want to talk. I want to definitely, you can finish what you're saying, but I want to also talk about the state of the empire and where we headed from here as far as African and
So to sum up, to sum up what I was trying to say vis-a-vis the police unions, is what we should have there should be a class action initiated against the 5 or 6 major police unions in the United States. And the class action should say that they should be legally decertified. They should be decertified as presently constituted and recertified as armed agents of the state. So now they have a different relationship to the community.
Right.
That the unions cannot interject politically as conditions of employment and all of this stuff. They could protest the police coming into the black community because it's too dangerous for the police to come in, single O. We have to have SWAT team trucks. If we don't get SWAT team trucks, then you soft on crime. You're not protecting our officers.
Right, right.
You see what I'm saying? So we wind up with police posts in our community with these crackers sitting up in the police, but in Atlanta it's mostly black cops.
Right.
Right. It's mostly black cops because the slaves are running the plantation down there, and so the overseer is black too.
Right.
so
can't lose. Huh?
You can't lose for winning. Can't win for losing, bro.
Exactly.
But we need to understand that what's happening, and to segue into what you're talking about, You know, we need to understand what's happening here in America when we see that the political system, the two-party system, is a system of democratic fascism. Okay, and that there's a significant white population that believes they're being marginalized, that they're going to be pushed to the margins as the demographics of America changes. This is hundreds of millions of white folks, mainly white males, and they armed to the teeth, and they believe that America belongs to them, and they want to make America great again, and that means putting our black asses back in our place. You see,
right.
Because America didn't become great until we made Cotton king.
Right.
And they ain't pay us for that, and they ain't pay us for that shit yet.
Dig that. Right.
So we need to understand that when you talk to these people, these MAGA people, they're racist. They're from areas in which they think they feel threatened, you know, and all of this stuff, and they're armed to the teeth. And it's very important that we cannot underestimate the power of plenty of stupid people.
That's right.
You can't underestimate the power of plenty of ignorant people. What was the Dark Ages? The Dark Ages wasn't dark because there was no information around. The Dark Ages was dark because the people refused to see. And the people that could read and write, you understand, they knew what time it was, and they made sure they didn't shine no light on the people. This is why when Europe went through an age when the bourgeoisie overthrew or came up with the Magna Carta, all of a sudden we have the so-called, that was the end or the epitome of the age of enlightenment. How you gonna get enlightened if you wasn't in the dark to begin with? You see, you see what I'm.
They serious. These motherfuckers serious, bro.
I'm telling you. So, damn. So, so, damn. So I'm just saying, when you think about it, you know, it's like, damn. You know, how can we be so foolish to not take the initiative? It's not making putting an action in court, for instance, to have the police decertified because we're saying they're not workers, that the police unions are not on par with working class people's unions and their rights and everything. They're living, they have exemptions, they're above the law, they're above this and that, you know, and doesn't mean that we are putting this in the courts because we actually think that the courts are going to say, yeah, they should be decertified and reconstituted. That's not the point. The point is to change the parameters of the debate and build a mass movement with a strategic vision and understanding of what the police really are and the function that they're supposed to perform. You see? And making the unions justify their very existence in a legal forum, in a public forum, is one of the most eloquent ways to do that. But now when I say this to lawyers today, activist lawyers, they tell me how they're too busy now defending people who were arrested during the uprisings around police brutality and the pipelines and in the Midwest and all of this stuff, and they're overwhelmed. And I'm saying to them, man, nobody's asking you to do everything. You're not supposed to abandon these people, these activists, you know, but you're supposed to be advising and encouraging a whole new generation of law students and young lawyers who want to get involved to think about these types of class actions, to think about taking the initiative against these institutions on this level. You see? And to actually begin to organize a class action like that. You know? And it's the same with the BDS movements, which brings us internationally. With the BDS movement has been criminalized, has been demonized in academia, on campuses, in the business sector. You see what I'm saying? And that's because of what? That's because the Zionists in Israel have an effective instrument to effectuate and influence American domestic policy. And that's AIPAC.
Right.
And AIPAC, therefore, is functioning in the United States as an agent, as an unregistered agent of a foreign government. So why hasn't the BDS and why haven't the activists who are in support of Palestine, who are in support of peace in the Middle East, why haven't we filed a show cause with the Justice Department as to why this political action committee is allowed to function as an unregistered agent of Israel, when in fact the United States shut down Palestinian support groups in the United States that were sending money to Hamas for hospitals, for educations, and said that they were supporting a terrorist organization because Hamas was on. Yes, so if they could shut down progressive organizations for supporting people's movements and supporting people's struggles abroad, why don't we shut down these crackers that's supporting the apartheid state, the racist state, settler state of Israel? Right. So when you see what I'm saying? So there's ways that we could take the initiative in the court that has political ramifications far beyond the courtroom. You see, but we're not thinking about those things. You see, we're not trying to even consider those things. We're talking about, oh, we're too busy stuck in our niche. You see, we're stuck in our niche, and as a result, the U.S. empire, you know, is moving, trying to close the gaps with its policies in Africa, AFRICOM, you know, that in its lily pad strategy of placing and training militaries in Africa so that the United States could effectuate interventions in in African countries without troops, without boots on the ground, and just to give them logistical support or intelligence support or support from data and surveillance system. I mean, if you look at the police here in Ghana, for instance, and you go by one of their roadblocks, the police have all the same uniforms on that the police in the U.S. have on. They have the same type of. They just got Ghana on it.
Wow.
And so the United States has all of these military contracts, all of these police contracts, training the police departments. The Israelis do too, giving them intelligence surveillance gear, showing them how to surveil their own populations. You know, so what happens to these black elected officials? What are these black elected officials in Congress who are on the U.S. Foreign Relations Committee and are saying about U.S. policies in Africa, supporting these despots and these regimes and these reactionary regimes? You know, the U.S. has troops in the Sahel. They have troops in Tokrati right here. They have troops in the Sudan. They have troops in Ethiopia. Come on, man. They're conducting drone strikes in Africa. And what are black elected officials saying about any of this? Nothing. They're saying absolutely nothing.
Yeah. The same thing they're doing here in the States. It's like when shit go down, we need more police. We need more troops. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And what is it for?
Oh, no, the troops need sensitivity training.
Sensitivity training, yeah.
Yeah. And when the police pull you over here, they talk just like that. You be saying, I'll be goddamn, you know, they say we're looking for contraband, we're looking for guns, we're looking for drugs, where yada 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 yada. Sir, you want to step out the car? Wow. No, motherfucker, accent. I ain't stepping out the car. Why I gotta step out the car? But the average Ghanaian, he gonna step out the car. Now when they stop me, I go into some shit. Right. You see, and everything goes downhill from there. You know, so I basically got to make jokes. Say, man, you standing out here, it's 99 degrees out here, and you got that big black flak jacket that you got from America on, them big combat boots, a helmet, goggles, and all that. I said, I know you hot as a motherfucker in that, right? And he said, we checking for contraband. I said, well, man, my AK is in my front pocket and my Uzi is in my back pocket. Which one you want to see first? And he said, okay, let's go.
Right. Yeah, man. Hey, it's crazy, and that's important what you're saying, because of the fact that you have so many folks that's saying that you know, they talk about how it's different in Africa, like, you know what I'm saying, and like,
but it is different.
Police.
But it is different, because the police here used to be unarmed. They're not that way no more. Okay, they used to be like the old British police. They used to be unarmed. So you know, they couldn't they couldn't commit no brutality in the community in the middle of the marketplace because people would kick their ass, right? And but what we need to see is that if you go on YouTube and you Google in the five the 10 most protected leaders, or the 10 most protected leaders in Africa, you'll see that they got like these individuals that pulled that coup in Guinea, in Mali. You'll see that these militaries, that these individuals were trained by the French, they were trained by the Americans. The guy that pulled the coup in Guinea, he was in the Foreign Legion. He was in Afghanistan on special ops with the US. You see what I'm saying? And these are the ones that are protecting the elites, the political elites in Africa. And the justification that the US gives for arming them and training them is that they're fighting Al Qaeda affiliates in their country. They're fighting ISIS affiliates in their country.
How nice of the US. Right.
Yeah, so that's you see what I'm saying. Right. And then when you find out that these so-called ISIS affiliates are movements, people's movements that have been struggling against the despots in the central government because they don't get nothing from the government, because the government exploits their territory and gives mining contracts and destroys their crops and everything. You find out that these are what these movements are basically fighting against, fighting for. You see. They got ISIS is the first. I mean, because they Muslims and the country is 98% Muslims, and they on some jihad stuff, on some serious throwdown, crazy jihad stuff. You understand? So what? Now they down with Al Qaeda, and you and I know as Muslims and as political activists that ISIS was created by the United States and the West. Right. You know, and we also know that the reason why we have never heard of an ISIS attack in Israel. Have you? Never.
Never will.
See? And you see, and the U.S. has bombed. And this started under Bush, and then Obama took it to a whole new level, and so the U.S. has a military diplomacy. You know, Susan Rice, who was with the Wicked Witch of the West, Hillary Clinton. When she was at the state, it was those two that devised the concept of humanitarian intervention. That's what they used when they overthrew Gaddafi and murdered him. A so-called humanitarian intervention. And look where Libya is at now. Look at the condition that Libya is in now. You see? And the war in the Sahel is a war over minerals, unprecedented minerals that stretch across the breadth of Africa. The French are in the Sahel, the British are in the Sahel, NATO is in the Sahel. United States got special operations in the Sahel. You see, and so this war is being waged, you know, in the shadows, and black people in the United States don't have a clue, because a lot of the military contracts that's coming to these particular despots and stuff, these military contracts and these training programs are supported by U.S. law enforcement. They're also part and parcel of U.S. law enforcement. If we look, do you remember when the former police chief of New York went to Haiti and was supposed to be training the Haitian police several years ago? Look at Haiti now. You see, and the U.S. is considering what? Intervention, because 17 missionaries were kidnapped by armed thugs and gangs. Hundreds of people were being kidnapped in Haiti every day, but you didn't even hear about that. You see, and so we need to understand that law enforcement in our community, the Garrison State, the police state, the Democratic Fascist State of America suborns and support similar type of policing and support of despots and militaries around the world, and considers that part of their national interest. and we have elected officials that don't challenge those policies, that don't challenge those programs, and ultimately, it's our sons and daughters in the U.S. military who pay the price when war breaks out, or when they get slaughtered in some misbegotten base somewhere in the middle of Southeast Asia or the middle of Africa, and we say we didn't know they had troops there.
Right on.
You see,
Right on. Right.
so there is a connection between the Garrison State's domestic police force and its militarized police force and the arms industry in the United States. It's the arms industry that the United States has, the first largest the biggest arms industry on the planet. Okay, that is is the reason why you can't get gun control. It's the reason why you can't get the gun lobby power in Congress and in the state and in the centers of power is far more potent and far more bankrolled than anything you and I could talk about.
Right on. Right on.
You see?
Man, listen, we're gonna have to bring you back on here because you about to go into a whole nother thing, because we definitely got to come back and talk about the whole arms business, because of the fact that that's a whole nother segment. You know what I mean? So for the viewers, leave a comment. You know what I'm saying? Let us know what you feel about what you heard. We've been talking to Dhoruba Bin Wahad, and he, man, I gratitude first and foremost, you know what I mean, for this political education moment, because I think that one of the things that more important than a quote unquote interview is for folks to be politicized, because oftentimes folks listen to check out something and it's like it's almost entertaining. And what we try to do here at Black Power Media and Riot Starter TV is politicize the masses and doing it in a way that everyone can understand. So we appreciate you taking your time over on the continent. When I called you, you was on the beach in Ghana somewhere, chilling, kicked up, with your heels kicked up, and you're like, okay, let's go. so definitely, I had to bring it out like that. You came inside, shades and everything. Like, look, man, you interrupted my.
They don't weaponize data, so I'm trying to deal with this facial recognition stuff, man.
Hey, man, I ain't mad at you, man. Hey, look, man, you can put on a ski mask, they gonna still know it's you.
But at least they gotta do some work, man. They got to sit at the computer for a minute, and say, yeah, they got to do some work instead of me just coming on, skinning and grinning, with nothing on and all of this stuff, So
you sound like me, man. My pops and my uncle one time, I used to walk around with the fatigues on all the time, and they said, man, every time we see you, you looking like goddamn, militant man and shit. He said you gotta be more inconspicuous. You know what I'm saying? So a few days later,
incognito.
So, a few days later, I'm walking down the street. Should I see him? I got some khakis on and a shirt, and they looking at me, and I'm looking like, I'm coming with a whole new style. They like, man, fuck that shit. It don't matter what you wear, you're gonna still be the same.
So I'm trying to tell you now. These crackers shoot first and ask questions later.
Man, it don't even matter. So right now, it's to be expected. A rebellion, an uprising, you know what I'm saying? A response is to be expected. So definitely, I appreciate you coming on board. We want to definitely invite you on maybe next week or whatever to expand this conversation.
Well, I'll be back there. I'll be back there by the first of the month. I got my plane ticket.
So you be back.
Shout out to the Black Panther. Yeah, shout out to the Black Panther Party Alumni Association, alumni group who paid for my return home so I could be with my boys, because I couldn't afford the ticket. So shout out to them. I just want them to know I got the ticket. I'm on the way back, and if you look for me in the whirlwind, I'll be gone.
Amen. We'll do this. We'll do the next one in person. You know what I'm saying? Exercise all right. You know what I'm saying? But be safe out there, bro. I'm gonna holler back at you soon. You know what I'm saying? And get a love to the comrades out there, and stay on the right side of the barricades, brother.
All right, black man. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and to your listeners, man. And you stay strong, man, and watch your back. And like they
Amen.
say in jail, man, drink plenty of water and walk slow, bro.
No doubt. Check it out, Riot Starter TV, Dhoruba Bin Wahad, Kalonji Changa, and you know, we're gonna be back at you. Like the brother said, look for us in the whirlwind. We out of here, man. Be safe out there. Riot Starter TV, Black Power Media. Peace.
Peace.